This is Semiconductor Insight.
Let's talk about something that's in your pocket right now, something that powers our entire world, from AI to, well, global security. I'm talking about microchips. And what you need to know is that right now, there's a massive, high-stakes game being played to control them, and the rules are changing completely. Okay, check this out. This number right here is kind of mind-blowing. A full 90% of the world's most advanced, most powerful chips, they come from one place. Just one. Taiwan. Now, you can probably see how that's a huge vulnerability for, the entire global economy. And then you've got the other side of the coin. The US uses a quarter of all these top-tier chips. A quarter. But it only makes about 10% of them on its own soil. That kind of imbalance, well, it's just not sustainable. And that's exactly why we're seeing this huge strategic shift from the United States. So, what did the US do? Washington made two massive moves, and they did it on the exact same day. Now, that was no accident. This was a carefully planned 1-2 punch meant to completely reshape the global supply chain for chips. It really breaks down into a classic two-pronged attack. Step one is all about bringing chip manufacturing back home. That's the onshoring part. And step two, that's about using penalties to slow down your main competitor. In other words, contain the rival. So let's look at the first prong, the carrot. The US put a huge trade deal on the table with Taiwan, which is, the undisputed champ of chip making. The goal here is pretty simple. Build a brand new, secure supply line, but this time on American soil. And the sheer size of this deal, it's just staggering. We're talking about $500 billion. That's not just a trade agreement. That is a massive, monumental investment to basically build an entire semiconductor ecosystem from scratch in the US. So how does that $500 billion number break down? Well, $250 billion of it is direct investment from Taiwanese companies to build out US facilities, for chips, but also for energy and AI. Then the Taiwanese government comes in and matches that with another $250 billion in credit guarantees. And what does Taiwan get in return? The US is lowering its general tariffs on Taiwanese goods. And here's where it gets really clever. The US is using a classic carrot and stick approach to make this all happen. The carrot is for the companies who agree to build new factories, or fabs, in the US. It's a huge incentive. They can import up to 2.5 times their new factory's capacity, totally tariff-free while it's being built. But the stick, for anyone who says no, a potential 100% tariff. That's a pretty powerful motivator, right? I mean, the message from the US Commerce Secretary could not be any clearer. This isn't just a friendly suggestion. Washington is basically saying the days of relying almost completely on other countries for these critical chips, yeah, those days are over, and they're using some serious financial muscle to prove it. Okay, so that was the carrot for Taiwan. Now let's talk about the second part of the strategy. At the same time all this was happening, the US unveiled a pretty big stick, and this one was aimed directly at its main tech rival, China. And what was the weapon of choice here? A new 25% tariff. But here's the key. This isn't just some blanket tariff on everything. No, this was a precision strike aimed right at the heart of the AI revolution. And when I say precision, I mean it. This tariff specifically targets the most powerful AI chips out there, from giants like NVIDIA and AMD, the absolute engines of AI development. So by taxing these specific chips when they're re-exported from the US to China, the stated goal is to slow down China's progress in the global AI race, citing, both economic and national security risks. So you put these two moves together, the carrot for Taiwan and the stick for China, and you can imagine the kind of shockwaves this is sending across the globe. Suddenly, every single major player in the tech world has to stop and rethink their entire game plan. For Taiwan, this whole thing brings up a really big question about its #1 national security strategy, what's famously called the Silicon Shield. The theory has always been pretty simple. If the entire world absolutely depends on your chips, you're just too valuable to invade. But what happens when that production starts to move elsewhere? I mean, think about it. If the US actually succeeds in shifting about 40% of Taiwan's production capacity over to America, you can see why some folks in Taiwan are getting nervous. They're worried that their shield could be seriously weakened, that moving so much of their talent and R&D could water down their biggest strategic advantage. But this geopolitical chess game isn't just about the US, China, and Taiwan. There's another huge player getting pulled into this, the world's other semiconductor giant, South Korea, home to powerhouses like Samsung and SK Hynix. And for them, things just got very complicated. This really lays out the high-stakes trade-offs everyone is dealing with. For Taiwan, you've got this stronger partnership with the US, but the risk of a weaker silicon shield. For China, it's a huge incentive to build up their own domestic industry, but they risk falling behind in the AI race. And for South Korea, well, it's a chance to negotiate, but also a big threat of way more competition. Now, if you're South Korea, you might look at this deal Taiwan is getting and think, hey, wait a minute, that's a raw deal for us. But here's where it gets really interesting. There's this little rule in international trade, and it's about to flip the script for them completely. It's called most favored nation status. And there's a clause in South Korea's existing trade deal that basically says, whatever the best deal is that you give to anyone else, we get that too. So what does that mean? It means South Korea can now go to the US and demand the exact same generous tariff breaks that Taiwan just got. So what looked like a bad deal, suddenly it's a huge piece of leverage. So what we're really watching here are the tectonic plates of technology and geopolitics shifting right underneath our feet. This isn't just about factories or tariffs. It's a fundamental realignment that's going to decide who leads in the 21st century. A whole new map for the chip world is being drawn. And the big question is, who's going to be holding the pen?
This has been Semiconductor Insight. Thank you